competing the right way. Please welcome Cyril Jr. Dim.
Thank you very much. The first original speech I ever gave was a speech about trees. I wrote it as any kid would write their homework, rehearsed it in front of a mirror for what felt like centuries, and gave it to a small crowd of students and dignitaries. I say small crowd, but there was one person present that day who everybody wanted to impress. She was a member of parliament. Her name was Jessie, and she was a strong woman, an inspiring woman. Jessie's eyes were wide open as I delivered my cutting research on fruits from trees, fuel from trees, air from trees. I felt like a young Stephen Hawking, if I dare say so myself. At the end of the program, Jessie said, "Young man, you need to make sure more people hear this speech." She invited me to plant a tree, an American ash tree. It was National Tree Planting Day that day. A couple of years later, I was still giving that same speech when a noble-looking gentleman approached me and said, "We have a public speaking society that meets every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Don't be late." Thaddeus would become my first mentor. He also was the reason I discovered there was such a thing as speech contests. Now, my first impression, rap battles for nerds. I was surprised to find myself writing my first contest speech not so long afterwards. I never fancied myself a good speechwriter, but can you imagine how I felt when a few months later my speech was on the agenda for national championships? I was that close to being the king of the nerds. The problem with such quick success, however, is that it builds ego. And I fully expected to become a national champion on my first try. Thank goodness that didn't happen. Friends, all of us compete for personal reasons. Some compete for financial reasons, and others yet for the prestige. I can't promise you that this speech will help you win all your contests, but I can promise that you will find ways to become a better contestant. I've spent the past decade participating in speech contests, not because I'm so dedicated, but because I've made so many mistakes. It took so much time to go from one contest to the next. The first mistake was at that very first national championship. By now, you know that I lost. The winning speaker was a Ndebele lady. Her speech was titled, "My Voice is My Savior." She won $700. Second place won $250. Third place won $100, and I came fourth. There were consolation prizes for everyone, and the normal person would be appreciative. Well, I took the opportunity to sulk like a big baby. I forced myself to walk onto the stage, gave the weakest handshake I could, couldn't maintain eye contact, didn't pause for the photo, and walked straight out of the auditorium when it was all done. I thought this was insignificant and would be forgotten. After all, I wasn't the winner, right? Well, they remembered me next year when I came back to compete again. This time, the winning speech was again from a Ndebele boy, this time, titled, "All Rise, Here Comes the Judge." My speech was lucky number 10. You see, in Zimbabwe, we don't just announce the top 3. No, they announce the top 10 because it's 10 provinces, and they assume if you're in the finals, then you're amongst the 10 most talented speakers in the country. And of those 10, I was the least talented. 3 years later, I was no closer to winning. I had tried everything to make these judges like me, and I was starting to get convinced that the problem was with them and not with me. At the time, my first mentor, Thaddeus, was preparing to give his first TED Talk. Thaddeus, TED Talk. The thing with TEDx is you're not being judged in the conventional sense of the word. You're not going to be given a blue certificate, a silver one, or a maroon certificate when it's all said and done. You're there purely for an idea that you believe in so much that you want to share it. That was the break I needed. And on the 6th attempt, I wrote a very personal speech on the power of doubt. Not so long after, I moved out of my mother's house and into Europe. I told myself it is time to be as irresponsible as I can to make those decisions that I will definitely regret when I'm 40. And so I joined Toastmasters. Very quickly, I learned about the World Championship of Public Speaking, and I fully expected to become the next world champion in my first year as a Toastmaster. Oh, thank goodness that didn't happen. Typically, I gave myself a few weeks to prepare a speech. I also gave myself a few more weeks to rehearse that speech. I would write a speech much like I would write an assignment in college, and I would rehearse that speech in front of a mirror for what felt like centuries. This was enough at club level. This was enough at area level. This was even enough at division level. But district championships, that's a different ball game. I was in both the humorous speech contest and the international speech contest. In the humorous speech contest, I met a certain speaker. He had this charisma that is typical of fellows from the tropical subcontinent of India. And he had a speech about seduction. You do not beat that with a few weeks of preparation. In the international speech contest, I met another speaker. She was an actress. An actress! You do not beat an actress with a few weeks of preparation. The only thing I was prepared for at this conference was accepting the consolation prize. I gave a firm handshake, maintained teary eye contact, and forced myself to smile. If you talk to me nicely, I have the pictures, and I will think about sending them to you. I didn't sulk. I went straight back home, and I cried myself to sleep. But that experience was a break I needed. I knew what needed to happen the next year if I was going to compete. See, I live in Poland, but I don't speak much Polish. A fellow Toastmaster encouraged me to warm up for the next round of contests by entering the Polish humorous speech contest. Now, I knew that this would probably need more than a few weeks to prepare. So I wrote the speech in English, had it translated, and started learning it word for word. The paranoia, the fear had me going around the park, asking complete strangers to give me 7 minutes of their time so I could give my speech. I remember walking into cafes, approaching fine ladies, asking them what they thought about my speech. In retrospect, I must have looked ridiculous. And keep in mind that this was 6 months before the club contest. 6 months after the club contest, I was still preparing a speech in Polish titled Książ brzmi w ścinie for the national championships in Polish. Well, at this point, you remember that I was doing the contest for the actual humorous and international speech contest. And you might be wondering, well, what happened then? Well, at this point, I'd like to break off a bit from my story and share with you the story of a speaker that I met at the division champ for the humorous speech contest. His name is Naveen. He is another very interesting chap from the tropical subcontinent of India. He gave a speech titled, Let It Go. Would you like to hear a snippet from the first few moments of that speech? Zoom Master, with your permission, I'd like to share my screen, please.
Teacher, can I go pee? Do you have to pee every time during my classes? It can wait. I don't think so. I was a 7-year-old boy waiting for my teacher's approval to pee. My bladder had other plans though. He started singing a song. Couldn't hold it in, heaven knows I tried. And my brain and my bladder sang a song together. Let it go, let it go. I can't hold it in anymore. And so I let it go. For those of you who know the pleasure of letting it go, it was a warm feeling.
I can't get enough of that speech. I watch it time and time again. Naveen didn't win that contest. He came third. But he had a much bigger smile than the person who came first. And I didn't understand. So I asked him how he felt in this moment. Naveen said, I got all the validation I needed today. I came here for my audience and I got my audience. Naveen was the recipient of the audience award, and Naveen had come there not just to sway the judges, but to win the crowd. And in his mind, the mission was accomplished. I respected Naveen's words, but like I said, I couldn't understand them. I wasn't yet able to separate my feelings of contentment, my fulfillment, from the outcome of the contest. Have you ever met people like that? Perhaps do you ever feel that way? You can't necessarily be happy unless you win the contest. I'll come to this later on because now we're going to move on to more recent history. I was fortunate enough to be invited for the semifinals of the International Speech Contest, the World Championships of the International Speech Contest. And I was so excited. My family was so excited. My grandma got so excited. She got a glass of wine and she got drunk. Thaddeus was no longer mentoring me. My new mentor was a rather experienced Toastmaster. She interestingly also had experience as an actress, as a musician, and of course, as a coach. My new mentor's name was Naomi. Now, Naomi is the kind of person who will readily tell you the truth that you don't want to hear. And more than working on my speeches, Naomi was interested in working on me as a speaker and a person. We rehearsed, we spoke, she listened. You see, it was David Henderson, a world champion himself, who said the best way to become a better speaker is to become a better person. And Naomi's philosophy was quite similar. After a decade of preparing for speeches, Naomi told me, it's not the speech, it's the speaker. And isn't that true? While I had spent years learning the tricks, learning how to ensure that judges score me greatly, I had put very little into becoming a man of great character. How many of you would like a man of poor character to win a contest? How content would you be if you, in poor character, won a contest? I didn't qualify for the finals this year. Well, thank goodness that happened. And I've spent the past few months formulating a set of principles that I observed from the most successful competitors that I've had the privilege of sharing the stage with. And it's these principles that I'd like to share with you today. It's 6 of them. And you might want to think about writing them down, or at least writing down the one principle that applies to you the most. Are you ready? Principle number 1. Contests influence contests. Your audience are human beings. The adjudicators are human beings. They will remember how you handle victory. They will remember how you handle loss. You never want to lose a contest simply because someone remembers you in one of your moments of weakness. We're working with humans, and every interaction we have influences the next. So friends, please remember, contests influence contests. Principle number 2, you cannot be a judge and a contestant at the same time. I cost myself the better part of 6 years accusing a panel of judges for my loss, when really I should have taken full responsibility for my loss. As a speaker, as a contestant, you are in charge of your own well-being, and your job is to compete. The problem is we mix ourselves, or we can potentially mix ourselves in trying to say the result was unfair, that person didn't deserve to win. And it's difficult, very difficult to contain that at times. But as a contestant, or a good contestant, we remember that we're there to compete, and we can't be judges and contestants at the same time. Principle number 3, there are no miracles. You're going to meet people in contests who have wanted this for years, who have prepared accordingly for years. And it is next to impossible to beat such people with a few weeks of preparation. Some people have been sitting on that, and you know what? It's about time you and I write that speech that we may pull out years from now. Thinking back, writing speeches is much like planting that American ash tree. As that tree grows, it will face harsh weather, the elements, human beings, animals, and so forth. But in weathering all those storms, the full-grown tree is something that we all admire and take shade from. It's the same thing when you're writing that speech. It will face criticism. It may not be as entertaining as you want it to be at first. It may not be as impactful as you want it to be at first. But there are no miracles with speeches. Speeches are not a moment's thing. They are written, groomed, trimmed over time to make that big tree that everyone comes to for shade. So there are no miracles. A good contestant prepares as if everyone they're going to meet has the full potential to beat them. And then, of course, the next principle, that's principle number 4 now. You cannot care what people think of you. You need to be able to, we need to be able to separate our contentment from the outcome of the contest. Our source of validation cannot be the people we're talking to, but the fact that we have the bravery to share that story with those people. As long as we are pinned by the need to be accepted, by the need to be validated externally, then we're never going to make people believe that we have a certain conviction internally. It's all about us in that moment when you're a contestant. How you feel internally is quite contagious. And if you feel vulnerable and in need of acceptance, unfortunately, that will catch on. And the judges are trained not to be privy to any pity parties. So remember, friends, you and I are in charge of our own well-being, and we cannot be blinded by what other people think of us. And then, of course, the principle that has carried me to this point, the principle that has helped me to accept the failures, to learn from the failures, and today to share those failures with you. It's the speaker, not the speech. The best way to be a better speaker is to be a better person. So friends, we all need to think about what we're doing off the stage, to build the speeches that we present on the stage. How are we a better person each day for ourselves and for others? Because when we think about it, these are the stories we share in contests. These are the stories that sell us to the point where a judge can decide whether we're going to win or not. So principle number 5, as much as we'd like to be better speakers technically, at the end, it's about the person rather than the speech. The last principle, and I'm sure you'd agree with me, this is the most important principle. It is much larger than winning. The motivation for entering a contest, it can't just be to win. Winning is an event. You get the trophy, you get the certificate, and well, that's that. People clap for you, and next year we look for another winner. Your reason for competing needs to be much, much deeper than winning. May we all learn a lesson from Naveen, who came there for his crowd, who told a story about peeing because he wanted his crowd to be happy, his crowd to be entertained. And when we remember all this, we enter contests with more confidence, and regardless of the result, we leave the contest with a sense of fulfillment. So are you thinking about entering a contest, or has competing been something that you've been hesitant about, nervous about? Well, it might be in your best interest to think about these principles, your reasons for entering the contest, and how you would feel if things didn't necessarily go your way. My story coming this far has been one that's been made largely of mistakes, the things that I've done wrong as I was trying to find my way. I hope that through this speech, you make it with far less mistakes. And please remember your speech about a tree, that first speech, because I'm pretty sure you agree with me that it all starts with a speech, the right motivation, and the dedication, commitment, and bravery to give that speech to an audience. So friends, as you go forward competing, I wish you the very best, and I hope that you compete the right way. Thank you.